My definition is that the digital shelf is the equivalent of the physical shelf. It's just that the digital shelf has no limitations. It's all over. It's always on. It's always connected, and there's no human between you and the customer. So the only sales tool you have on the digital shelf is your content.
Welcome to the Digital Advantage by Bynder, a show by marketers for marketers who want to create engaging content experiences to differentiate their brand from the competition. In each episode, a member of the Bynder team will host a conversation with a leading marketing expert to discuss trends, challenges, solutions, and how to remain competitive in an uncertain economic landscape. Our guests will share stories that showcase innovative ways of using content to inspire marketing leaders to take action, optimize their content strategies, and ultimately achieve the success they seek. Let's jump right in.
Welcome, everybody, to today's Bynder session that we're doing with our partners in River. The session is on how marketers can unite technology to build a seamless path to purchase. My name is Donal O'Marwan. I'm Lifecycle Marketing Director here at Bynder, and I'm joining you today from our brand new studios in Amsterdam. It's the first time it's being used. We have an official opening tomorrow, so you are here for the debut of this wonderful sort of facility we have here. So before we get started, this session is being recorded today. We'll share notes afterwards. For any reason you need to jump off, etc., we can make sure that you get all the information, but do stick with us, as I think it'll be a really good one. Do ask any questions you have and be sure to engage. I think you should be able to see somewhere on your screen little emojis if you see something you're happy with or not happy with or confused by. That's an easy way to engage for those of us that prefer a little bit of brevity to our efforts. So let me introduce our guest today. Johan Boström is co-founder and chief customer ambassador at InRiver. Johan, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Would you care for everybody here just to tell us a little bit about InRiver?
Absolutely. InRiver has been around in the product information management space for more than 15 years. We help manufacturers, brand manufacturers, and retailers to create engaging content, and we help them to distribute that content to all their channels, own channels, third-party channels like in Amazon or Walmart. We do digital shelf analytics to help to see that what's getting produced is actually getting published, that it's correct, and that it actually converts and creates the visibility needed. So we do work through a partner network and through all our fantastic alliances like Bynder, because it is an ecosystem and we're part of a big ecosystem. So I'm really delighted to be here and speaking to you.
Delighted to have you. I think you've got a large event coming up soon, Pinpoint as well. Would you like to tell us about that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We have our customer and partner event called Pinpoint. We have one in Americas in Chicago coming up, and we have one in Malmö, Sweden, where we have our headquarters coming up. And it's, for me, the best time of the year. It's like Christmas because I get to meet all of the customers and all of the partners that we've been working with for a long time. And it's really, really fun and very engaging. And also, I get to learn a lot of new stuff when I'm there. So for everyone that's an InRiver customer or interested in InRiver, I should say go to Pinpoint because it's both fun and engaging.
Fantastic. Yeah, you mentioned there about like partners, network, and digital ecosystem. And one of the things I've actually heard Dan and Pim referred to is as a power couple. So hopefully we offer a view on that today. And if anybody has any suggestions on cool nicknames for me and Johan like that, feel free to offer them up in the chat as well. So a little bit about Bynder, for those that don't know, we are the leading digital asset management platform. We just celebrated our 10th birthday. We're considered a leader, whether you ask analysts like Forrester or, our customers through platforms like G2. So it's really great to get that validation in the marketplace that we are from both that analyst perspective and from our very own customers as well. And, in the 10 years we've been around, we've seen a lot of changes in content and content delivery and creation and management and distribution. And just recently we've released our State of Content report, which is, why we're having these chats today, and sort of these findings that we have are going to run through the conversation we're having today. And that State of Content, which should be available for download somewhere on your screens or certainly afterwards, is a survey of over 1,200 marketing and creative professionals from across industries and across the globe. We're just looking to see what their sentiments are as we enter into 2023 around the state of content. So some of the things we'll be looking at today and how they relate to today's topic will be why companies are investing in content this year, how those investments are in technology, are to streamline the creation and distribution of content and the prioritization of digital transformation to be able to deliver those great content experiences via an integrated digital ecosystem. So I will throw some statistics out at different points. They'll sort of feed into the questions I have for Johan and spark up the conversation. Would love if any of you listening, you hear some of those statistics, you're like, that sounds right to me, or holy moly, that's way different than what we're experiencing. Do offer up your opinions as well at any stage. So let's dive in. Johan, we have found that the vast majority of marketers globally, 69% of them to be exact, see spending on content, production, management, distribution as staying the same or increasing as we go into 2023. Now, particularly thinking about 2023, we're definitely entering some uncertain economic times. Why, in your opinion, are marketers investing more in content today?
Well, I think we've always heard that content is king. I would add to that context is King Kong. And these two, they interact with each other because it's hard to be in a customer's or consumer's context unless you have the content to create the context. So you need more content just to be in the context of the buyer or the shopper. And then you have the third-party syndications that most have to do today. And most of the receivers, most of the endpoints, whether they're being marketplaces, they're being Google or retailers or distributors, they want a certain set of content that fits what they need, meaning that you got to produce more content for those third parties as well. But you got to have maybe a text for Amazon, a text for Home Depot, a text for Walmart, and the text for your European outlets. So, and then you add localization onto that, it explodes really. And if you look at assets, that is, I think, exploded even more than text and attributes. If I'm shopping, at least, if I'm using myself as an example, when I'm browsing, the images are what catches my attention. That's where I start. Then I want to see the spec and see if it fits my kitchen or my living room or whatever it is that it needs to fit. But I don't start with the spec. I start with the images. I start with the media. And I think that's the reason that we have that media explosion, that the artifacts that belong to a product is just skyrocketing. And it's going to continue to grow. I'm pretty sure about that. And we'll get into some more reasons, I think, later in the conversation. For
sure. There's a lot sort of packed in there straight away. I mean, one of the data points that we've found is that 66% of the respondents, and this speaks to what you are saying, regularly use more than 11 channels for their marketing promotional activities. Right. So at the end touch points, there's an increasing number of, there's increasing number of them, some using 24 or more to distribute their content, to engage their consumers. But similarly, the expectations of consumers, and maybe that's one of the underlying trends or patterns we can touch on now, the expectations of consumers has risen greatly in the last few years, particularly, pre-COVID and post-COVID. I think, is that something you're seeing as well, changing expectations of B2C and B2B consumers in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. B2C, if you look at that specifically, they shop around way more now than they did before. And this is a trend that's been ongoing for I don't know how long. It's going to continue to grow. I think the number of touch points is going to continue to grow. But at the end, it's also, for a consumer, they want to find something fairly fast often. They're not after looking in 100 places. So in order to catch their attention, your content needs to be what sells the product. And unfortunately for brands, the brands itself, the brand is no longer enough to sell a product. The brand value is diminishing in most sectors. So the product needs to stand on its own 2 feet. It needs to be able to sell itself, because consumers typically search for the properties of a product today. When you look at how they search on Google or how they search on Amazon, they're not adding brand names anymore into their search. They're adding the properties that they're looking to get an answer to. So that's if you look at B2C. If you look at B2B, they're increasingly wanting to self-service. And if you want to self-service, you need to have your context in place. You don't want to go through hundreds of thousands of SKUs to find that part that solves your problem. You want the seller to know what part you need to solve this problem. And that adds more content too, of course, and it needs more context as well. The B2B buyer that wants to add a part or buy accessories or buy consumables, they, of course, in their turn, want a frictionless buying journey. They're not doing this to satisfy their own needs. They're doing it as part of their job. So they want frictionless buying journeys. And that in itself is not only about content. It is about how they navigate, how they find things, and how you can serve that up as easily and quickly as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the overarching figure that we've seen around this is that, pre-COVID, I think it was about 14% of all retail sales, right? If we just take that B2C side of retail sales were online. And now that's projected to be 24% in 2026. Like, I mean, that's a pretty seismic shift when you're considering the whole, what we're asking people to do, where they're asking them to spend their dollars. But that's just a part of it, right? Like, that doesn't account for, that's where the transaction takes place. It doesn't account for discovery, pre-purchase engagement, or indeed that post-purchase if you're talking about reviews, etc. Right? Like, that is all part of that product information that's helping other people sort of buy. And it's a very interesting thing you say there about is it brand led or is it product led? I definitely absolutely accept that point that you're making about the product led is for discovery, but then that great product discovery experience builds brand as well, right? Like, if you're finding it and you engage with it, you understand what it is, and if it works for you and that's satisfying, you're going to continue maybe to purchase on that e-commerce platform or that particular product that you bought. And that is sort of that long-term sort of brand building piece that comes into it, because ultimately, you're trying to deliver a wow moment or a moment of accuracy. And if you're delivering that sort of moment of disappointment as well, that's, your competitors are just that one click away that can move. I've done this several times. I've searched something. I'm sure we can all relate to this experience. You search something, you search a product that, I made the plunge recently. I bought an air fryer. So it's like best air fryer for 2 people apartment, you know what I mean? So I get that sort of, search experience in, but I landed on sites. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't immediately clear to me. Product imagery, product information was all over the place. And I just would back out, go to the next place, right? Like, that's my actual buyer's journey, which is, sort of informed by all of that great sort of visual content and sort of product information. So we've acknowledged sort of these, what we might broadly call content experiences, right? How, all the marketing interactions that a buyer has, particularly digital in the context of our conversation today, but it does expand to sort of physical or in-person across these omni-channel at the point of purchase, post-purchase, pre-purchase, everything. That these are incredibly important for brands to, create new customers and create sort of lifetime customers as well. But one of the things I've heard you speak about, it might be worthwhile touching on today, is this concept of the digital shelf and its place in creating this path to purchase, right? Like, maybe we could just dive into specifically to what that phrase means and how it is just helping people convert at the first time.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few different definitions. Depending on who you ask, you're going to get a different one. My definition is that the digital shelf is the equivalent of the physical shelf. It's just that the digital shelf has no limitations. It's all over. It's always on. It's always connected, and there's no human between you and the customer. So the only sales tool you have on the digital shelf is your content. And if you look at it like that, your content and the structure of it needs to guide the customer just like a salesperson would. And that means that the digital shelf is quite complicated to get right. And the hard part also is that it's constantly changing. If you're selling on marketplaces, you're selling through a dealer distributor network as well, you are going through an intermediary that will have a different view on how products are going to be presented on a product detail page and how the structure of the content is going to look like, the taxonomy, the hierarchy that the customer's navigating in, the facets that they're using. They're going to be different all over. And you have to be in control of that, because if you look at it, you're not on page 1 of the search result, you're pretty much not going to get the sale. So it's not just about the content being correct so that you avoid returns and bad experiences in that sense, because that I think is also an important piece of the experience, is that they're getting the right product, that you're guiding them to the right product. But at the end of the day, you need to be on top of what is presented on those third-party sites if you have a dealer distributor network or selling through marketplaces. Because if you don't, you're not going to succeed. And that's where digital shelf analytics comes in. One, you need to see that they're actually publishing the right content, because they're not necessarily that structured. So errors are going to get introduced in that process, and it might be wrong what they're publishing. But also to see to that you have the right content to be visible, so that each search engine, because they're all different, Amazon's different from Google and Google's different from Home Depot, you got to adopt the content so that you get the visibility your products deserve on each and every one of them. And it's impossible, I would say, to do without digital shelf analytics that can help you do this and crawl all these sites, see that the content is actually the right content, and see to that you are actually getting the visibility that you need. And so you can quickly react when things change, because your competition is going to be trying to beat you all the time. They're going to update their content. And this is a war that's just ongoing, right? And then you have the algorithms changing all the time too. So gotta have the tools and the means to stay visible.
I think you're 100% right. And thank you very much for that really cogent explanation for us there. You're leading me into the next thing I was going to ask you about, which is that idea of time to market. It's where we practiced it. But so our second data point that we uncovered was a huge amount of marketers globally, 76%. And we also looked at this data based off seniority, and where we saw at a CMO level, that was 78%, so it was slightly higher above. So this is an executive level priority, is, time to market, faster time to market to deliver that great content experience. So I think you sort of touched on it there, but maybe we could just bring that back into focus and have a look at, why, when considering the digital shelf, time to market is so important for companies.
First and foremost, sellable days. So if you can cut the number of days before your product actually ends up on the shelf and can get bought, of course, that's going to give you revenue. Having things in stock but not for sale is the worst possible position to be in. But then, as I alluded to previously, you're not done. You're not done when you have published it. You're never going to be done. It's going to be a constantly evolving and updating of the content. It must be optimized for each and every touch point all of the time. And that is even more complex than having a fast initial production process. That's super important too. But keeping that content updated and fresh so that you get the visibility and you get the conversion that you need, that is truly something that is important. And I think that's really, if I look at our customers, most of them have had time to market as one of their KPIs. And time to market is then not only initial, but also updating. And for that very reason, that you're never going to be done. And when you're never going to be done, you're going to have an efficient process, not only to be able to produce and update and optimize, but also to keep the cost down, because content production is expensive. And there's a finite limit to how much content we can actually produce. So we need to really understand where it makes a difference to produce content and where it doesn't make sense. Does it make sense to have 10 pictures, or does it make sense to have 5? You need to know, because otherwise you got to just produce a lot of content that's not necessary, and you might miss content that is. So I think this is, again, where we need to measure more. We need to measure the effectiveness of the process, and we need to measure the effectiveness of the content and adapt it all the way through all of the time.
That's a really interesting point you're making there. And it just reminds me, we did a piece with Scott Brinker, who everybody probably knows. Mr. Martech does those crazy big marketing technology, landscape maps and everything. We spoke to Scott back in February, I think, and he was making this point of there was a huge emphasis for so long on customer data, right? Who is the customer? What do they buy? Organizing that into such a great system that we all know. We probably should have marketing automation systems, but centralizing them in some sort of CRM, etc. And we index so massively on that without necessarily understanding, without having marrying that with the content level data, like what is performing. When we can run personalized campaigns, but we're not centralizing the content and the data that we're getting around them anywhere and analyzing that. I do genuinely think, and obviously we're the, and I'd say we're probably at the forefront of this a little bit at Bynder, and you at InRiver as well, that you're seeing, the companies that are coming to us and talking to us about this are probably the ones that are already thinking about this, but there's a huge amount of way to go for a lot of companies. And it's not that's a hugely important point, right? The end touch points and the personalization platforms, and it's a huge part, but again, you mentioned about content production being expensive. We talked about the 11 channels previously. We didn't even think about, those 66% marketers who push content to more than 11 channels, whether they're personalizing them in some way, whether those 11 channels need to be are presented in different regions with different languages or something like this, and how many intermediaries there are between taking that from conception and central creation, distributing it to all those multiple touch points. So then if we go back to the question, which is how fast is time, important is time to market, like these are the things that are stopping you get to market. And then first thing you said, sellable days, right? How many days is that online? The second that product is online, you are selling, you're creating revenue. The second you are producing it, etc., you are not, right? You're not yet, not through that product, not through that item, not in that market or something like that. So I think that's incredibly important. And I think, a similar thing that's sort of underlying this for ourselves and what we're seeing in this particular research is that, while there is an investment in content, everybody's being asked to do, it used to be, right, fast, good, or cheap, pick two, right? That was sort of the phrase. But consumer demands are increasing. So good is not, it's table stakes now. You have to deliver a great experience, right? You have to be accurate, have to be enticing. Fast, we've just discussed about time to market. So the other option is cheap. Well, that stuff requires, but we're also all being asked to do more with less this year, right? In uncertain economic times. So there's an investment in content, but where's that investment in content going? And what we found in our research is that investment in content is happening, in consolidating technology systems a little bit and bringing systems together to do some of that sort of work that up until now might have been very heavy, a lot of heavy lifting, and allowing technology to do that, bringing creatives and product teams together to the start of the point of creation and then the point of analysis, but allowing the management and the distribution to be automated as much as possible and integrated through technology systems. And not to drown people in stats here, but one of the things we also found is that where people were generally very happy with their time to market when they'd implemented a DAM, but layering on a DAM and PIM increased the satisfaction with the metric time to market by 106% over DAM only, right? And I don't have PIM only as well. And that is that's a huge uplift. And it speaks to everything we're saying here about, what's happening in between that content creation and that content distribution. And also, why are people happy? Because it gets onto the end platform, the point of conversion faster, sooner, selling sooner, better results from your content, greater ROI. So a few questions in here from our audience. So the first one is, what tips or suggestions do you have for organizations wanting to deliver like a frictionless path to purchase for B2B buyers and B2C consumers? So I might take a run at this first, just quickly. From a B2B perspective, from our side, I would always consider where the individual came from and then consider what kind of value you're providing at that point. So similar to what Johan said earlier about, product specific things, we often see people coming in with a super specific question, do you integrate with, right? And that is not the first question somebody has about your product. So the first time they speak to us, it's very specific and you need to be able to answer that. So one thing that we see a lot of is very sort of deep linked pages getting a first touch. So our in-river page, Bynder and in-river. Okay, maybe there's people coming to that and saying, those things connect so I can use them. So great, I'm going to continue this. And you give them that moment of satisfaction. It's frictionless. They get the answer they need. That's not, gated by something. And it can allow, it validates your opinion of you that you're providing value. And similarly, hopefully what we're doing today here, to the witness, but we're providing some sort of value, some sort of insights into what it takes to, deliver that sort of frictionless path to purchase. B2B quite often has some sort of ingrained, friction with, often there's, gated things or, demos, etc., which are absolutely required. It's not always completely seamless, right? Completely frictionless. But that's certainly that B2B sort of processes would be like that, right? Like there, if you can provide the value so that people can do their own exploration, and we think about Gartner and the 72% of the buying journey that's done outside of interaction with sales, well, then you're required within that to provide the value outside of your own controls and allow people to direct their own journeys. That's certainly one thing I would suggest on the B2B side. But yeah, maybe you've got a slightly more integrated thing for the B2C or B2B and around tips or suggestions for people to create a frictionless path to purchase.
Yeah, I think that the buying journeys in B2B and B2C are fairly different. But again, I concur with everything you said. I believe that you have to see to that you're easily found. That starts there. If you're not found, you can't provide any value. You can't show them all your valuable content. And then, of course, see to that you have the right content and the right touch point so that it's actually in their context. Because if you're out of their context, no content in the world is going to help you. And that is the hardest part with e-commerce, is finding out the context of a customer, buyer, or consumer. You don't know them when they come in the first time. You have never seen them before. And that is very typical in B2C. In B2B, you typically have a relationship. You actually know who they are. And like we discussed, you probably have a lot of data about them in your CRM. Use that data, marry the customer with the content. Those are the two major parts. And I would say marry the customer with the product. See to that the right product gets introduced on the top left page when someone comes in. If you know who they are, if you can guess who they are, if you know where they're coming from, serve them up with something that is relevant to them. Because I think you look at the high street retail has always been about location, location, location. I think if you transfer that to the digital shelf, it's relevancy, relevancy, relevancy. Because you have a very, very short moment in time to be relevant enough for them to continue browsing on your site or looking at your product. So you got to be relevant. And that is marrying content and context, then you're relevant.
Absolutely. Definitely one of the sort of the pillars of a great content experience is that relevance that we say. So we were getting there, I think, with the DAM and PIM thing. So, and we did sort of, the promise of today is like how marketers can unite technology to build that seamless path to purchase. So if we throw out the third key data point from our research, 54% of respondents plan to find efficiencies in content creation in 2023 by consolidating technology systems, by uniting processes into technologies that speak to each other, that connected ecosystem that we're talking about. So what is driving that? Why is a connected ecosystem paramount in delivering a great content experience, in creating a seamless path to purchase? And you can expand that. We've led with DAM and PIM here, but we'll allow you to expand that out to other technologies as well that definitely play a role, because I think it's worthwhile thinking about the whole journey as well.
Well, I think DAM and PIM as domains have sort of the same goal. PIM is about consolidating product information into one single place. Because if you don't have it in one single place, if you have it in 1,000 spreadsheets and in different sites and different places, you store it on a file server somewhere, you're not going to get the efficiency needed to produce enough content, and you're not going to have the right quality. That is the key foundational reason for PIM to exist. And then you can expand that into everything else you can do with the PIM. But without the consolidation, PIM wouldn't be what it can be. DAM has sort of the same goal, consolidating all of the digital artifacts in one place so it's not spread around on all the laptops in the whole organization, meaning that you can get the efficiencies, you can start measuring, and you can start optimizing. And of course, if you look at it, you want these two to be integrated, because otherwise you don't have the full consolidation. You want InRiver and Bynder to be integrated, and they are. And I think if you would ask our customers sort of the same question you asked yours, they would be happier and say they're more efficient when they have a Bynder integration than when they don't, just due to the fact that, I mean, assets are the most important part of the, at least beginning of the buying journey. So if you don't have your assets readily available and the right assets produced and associated with the right products and SKUs, you're not going to be as successful as if you do. So I think that's sort of foundational. And I think it's pretty easy to understand the consolidation component of that. If you expand that to other technologies, I would say searchandising is something that I would add to it too. And I wouldn't just say searchandising in the way that you let your search engine just go through your site and try and create an index. Those days are gone. you should feed your merchandising engine straight from the PIM and straight from the DAM. They shouldn't be connected to a website that gets crawled by a search engine. That's not going to give you the quality you need, and nor is it going to give them the navigation they need. The customer needs a better navigation that ends up serving them up with the right products faster. So, and then the good part here is that in the merchandising engine that ends up learning everything about how your customers interact with your content, you feed that back into the PIM and the DAM so that you know what the customers need, want, and what makes them purchase. It's a gold mine sitting in a merchandising engine. That data is only used by the algorithms today. They're not used in the content production, but they should be. So I think that's going to be a huge thing in the future, just creating that feedback loop so that you get to know what content to produce and you can optimize it even faster and be more precise in how you produce your content.
You've just introduced me to, I forgive my ignorance, but the merchandising, whereas it's not one I was hugely familiar with. So that will be going in the glossary now for me. And I do think, you know, it's really interesting because we can be maybe be a bit myopic and sort of be like, well, if you just connect these two, and that's not what I'm hoping to leave anybody here with today. What we have to think about, like that path to purchase can extend out and the repeat purchase, etc. Like the whole buying journey has all of these multiple touch points that are served in person and digitally. Like there's an omni-channel experience here. And there's a question in as well that we might get to, which is, you know, kind of connected to this is what technologies are critical to include in your tech stack for a seamless path to purchase. I mean, critical is too narrow almost, and it totally depends on what you're doing yourself, right? Certainly, you know, it's not, I don't know necessarily that there is a type, what we're trying to get across, or if there's specific values or technologies that you absolutely need to have for your case, because there's certain industries that we don't serve very well, right? It's more about the technologies that you have speaking to each other, integrated, connected ecosystem, right? Like taking away the manual efforts so that your teams can focus on the things that drive revenue, that create results, that, you know, make better business decisions and better strategies down the line, so that you're not creating content, for example, in the case of Bynder, that doesn't get used, right? You know, there's some huge amount of content doesn't get used. And I think what the product gives you as well is crucial as well. So you've spoken about sort of digital shelf analytics, but content performance as well for us, right? Similarly, we know that in February 2023, Bynder served 18 billion assets to over 5,000 websites directly from its solution using, you know, products like dynamic asset transformation, but also APIs and that integrated ecosystem. Now, if we just think about the scale of that, right, and what's offered in there and what that is taking away from teams, there are teams out there that are still doing that, whether it's with their visual content and product information, or it is with, you know, other technologies, you know, whether that is, you know, workflow management, et cetera, right? Like there's loads of project management, et cetera. There's loads of things like this. Quite often these things exist in Excel, right? That we've all experienced that, I'm sure. And I think that's really the way that we're trying to encourage people to think about this. There is the multi-touch buying cycle that is so complex. There's these 11 or more, 2/3 of marketers pushing out to 11 or more channels, and but the things that we are talking about here today that are going to help you win more often than not are a relevant experience, a consistent experience, experience that makes sense at the point at which people are engaging with it. And I think that's probably what you want to be looking for, as opposed to necessarily key specific technologies. Depending on what industry you're in, if you're, you know, DAM or PIM will make sense for you. But the value of them together is really what we're talking about in particular when you're trying to win in that sort of digital or omni-channel space as well. So, you know, and I don't know, we're light on questions here. I think unless there's any sort of closing thoughts you have about creating a seamless path to purchase using DAM and PIM, or for marketers in general, I'll open the floor up to you.
I think if there's a big trend that we are seeing is that the content that we have been talking about, we've been talking about it in sort of the commerce context, right? But we see more and more non-commerce related use cases. And important channels for us always been, and because it is for our customers, it's been Salesforce Commerce Cloud and all its different types, B2C, B2B. But now we see Salesforce Service Cloud coming up, because customers that have bought equipment or service technicians that are going out servicing equipment, they need content. So it's a non-commerce related use case, but it's really, really important with content for those use cases too. So when you look at the stack, if you're in B2B, well, you might want to look at how to help customers to self-service, not only to buy things, but to see to that everything for them is frictionless and that you provide them with the best experience possible, because then you create loyalty and they will come back to you, which is hugely important. It's not just about selling that part that one time. It's about selling that part to this customer for a very long time. And that is everything to do about the whole experience, from how they purchase, how they find, how they can actually see how to repair or fix or improve what they already own. That experience is what we see is gaining a lot of traction, especially within B2B.
Absolutely. I think there's a whole separate conversation about how brands turn up at it. Like all these touch points, whether that's even internally as well. The true thing that we're understanding is that the visual content and the product content existing through those touch points is essential, right? So look, Johan, thank you so much for joining us today. Lovely chatting through this with you. Best of luck at Pinpoint, which I think is in Malmo on the 9th of May. And I think you also have soon enough one in the US as well. So yes, best of luck with those. And thank you so much for your time today. Thanks everybody for joining as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Digital Advantage, brought to you by Bynder, the leading digital asset management platform. Bynder helps you conquer the chaos of growing content, touchpoints, and relationships. If you found this episode inspiring, you'll love our additional content on our social channels, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform.